What if everything we're taught about comfort and happiness is fundamentally wrong? Research from the University of Bath's psychology department has revealed something extraordinary. People who regularly experience moderate discomfort and physical challenges demonstrate significantly higher levels of cognitive resilience and emotional stability than those living in constant comfort. Yet our entire society seems designed to eliminate any trace of hardship from our lives. Friedrich Nietzsche, that provocative philosopher with the magnificent mustache, sounded this alarm over a century ago. That which does not kill us makes us stronger, he famously declared. But what happens when nothing ever challenges us at all? When our greatest daily struggle becomes merely deciding which streaming service to binge-watch tonight? Today we're exploring what I call herd poison, Nietzsche's prophetic warning about how the comforts of modern society might be systematically destroying male potential. He feared we were creating generations of men who are, in his words, domesticated animals rather than the creators and conquerors we might otherwise become. This isn't just abstract philosophy. We'll connect Nietzsche's insights with contemporary research to understand why discomfort, struggle, and even suffering might be precisely what men need to reach their highest potential. More importantly, we'll examine how the absence of these elements explains the growing crisis of meaning, purpose, and identity that so many men experience in our comfort-saturated world. Growth mindset. Let's start with a striking observation. Research on growth mindset by Dr. Carol Dweck at Stanford University found that individuals who embrace challenges rather than avoid discomfort consistently demonstrate higher levels of achievement, innovation, and psychological development compared to those who prioritize comfort and convenience. As management thinker Peter Drucker once observed, the greatest danger in times of turbulence is not the turbulence itself, but acting with yesterday's logic. This insight perfectly complements Nietzsche's warnings. What Nietzsche foresaw was that modern society, with its emphasis on safety, comfort, and the elimination of suffering, would create what he called the last man, a human being so thoroughly domesticated that he loses all capacity for greatness. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche describes these men, no shepherd and one herd. Everybody wants the same. Everybody is the same. Whoever feels different goes voluntarily into a madhouse. One has one's little pleasure for the day and one's little pleasure for the night. But one has a regard for health. We have invented happiness, say the last men, and they blink. Sound familiar? Our consumer culture revolves around this promise: convenience, comfort, entertainment, safety. Dating apps eliminate the risk of face-to-face rejection. Food delivery services spare us the effort of cooking. Streaming services ensure we're never bored. Smart homes regulate our environment to perfect comfort. Everything in modern life seems designed to eliminate discomfort, struggle, and risk. But what if this comfort is precisely what's poisoning us? The comfortable life paradoxically leads to emptiness because it lacks the challenges necessary for psychological growth. Men who face no meaningful difficulties find themselves in a peculiar state, materially satisfied yet spiritually empty. Neuroscience. What Nietzsche's intuited through philosophy, modern neuroscience has confirmed through research. Our brains don't develop optimally in conditions of constant comfort. They require stress, challenge, and even periods of suffering to reach their potential. Research from Stanford University has explored the neurobiological effects of stress. A groundbreaking study by Kirby and colleagues demonstrated that acute, manageable stress can enhance neural growth in the hippocampus, a brain region critical for learning and memory. The researchers distinguished between what they call hormetic stress, beneficial stress that builds resilience, and chronic stress, which damages brain function. This scientific distinction maps perfectly onto Nietzsche's philosophical insight. He wasn't advocating for random suffering, he was advocating for the right kind of suffering, the kind that builds rather than destroys. Consider the contrast between two young men, one who faces the productive adversity of building a business, with its rejections, failures, and financial stress, and another who faces the destructive adversity of growing up in a broken home with abuse and neglect. The first type of adversity creates growth, the second creates trauma. The problem with our modern society, Nietzsche would argue, is that we've become so afraid of all forms of suffering that we've eliminated even the productive kinds, the very struggles that would make us stronger. Ask yourself, what specific challenges have made you stronger rather than broken you? Can you distinguish between the growth stress and destructive stress in your own life? Male identity across virtually all cultures throughout human history. Male identity has been forged through challenge, initiation, and overcoming obstacles. From tribal rites of passage to military service to entrepreneurial risk-taking, masculine identity formation has traditionally required facing and surmounting difficulty. Anthropologist David Gilmour's landmark book Manhood in the Making examined cultures worldwide and found that, while feminine identity was typically conferred biologically through the capacity for childbirth, masculine identity had to be earned through demonstration of courage, perseverance, and achievement. What happens when a society removes these traditional paths to masculine identity formation without replacing them with meaningful alternatives? We get exactly what we're seeing today, a crisis of male purpose, meaning, and identity. Traditional cultures understood this intuitively. The Maasai warriors of East Africa must hunt a lion to prove their manhood. Indigenous American tribes sent young men on vision quests. Japanese samurai culture subjected young men to rigorous training. These weren't arbitrary cruelties, they recognized that male identity requires proving oneself through challenge. Research by Blumenrance and Goldstein has shown that communities with defined transition rituals provide better psychological outcomes for youth than those lacking such structures. Additionally, anthropologist Victor Turner's influential studies demonstrated how transitional experiences fundamentally shape identity formation across cultures. NZR anticipated this crisis. In a society where comfort is the highest value, men lose the very struggles that would give their lives meaning and shape their identities. They become, in his terminology, part of the herd, domesticated, predictable, safe, and ultimately desperate for meaning they cannot find. The consequences are visible all around us: increasing rates of male depression, substance abuse, and what researchers at Princeton University have called deaths of despair. Men without purpose often seek artificial challenges through video games, risk-taking behaviors, or extreme ideologies, poor substitutes for the meaningful struggles that would actually develop their character and identity. Question yourself, are you trapped in comfort's prison without even realizing it? What modern rite of passage have you created for yourself, or could you create? Psychological effects. When men are not tested by life, several psychological phenomena emerge that Nietzsche identified and modern psychology has confirmed. First, there's what psychologists call covert depression, not the weeping, obvious depression most people imagine, but a numb, empty feeling often masked by excessive consumption, entertainment addiction, or nihilistic irony. Men untested by meaningful challenges frequently report feeling that they're watching their lives rather than living them. Research by Siri Holman and Silver has demonstrated a U-shaped relationship between adversity and mental health. Their study found that individuals with some lifetime adversity reported better mental health and well-being than those with either no adversity or high levels of adversity. This suggests that moderate challenges may foster resilience and psychological health, while their complete absence can be as problematic as overwhelming adversity. Second, there's what NZR called resentment, a psychological state of simmering resentment and hostility born from a sense of weakness and inability to express strength. Men who have never proven themselves through genuine challenges often develop deep, unconscious resentment toward those who have, or towards society at large. Nietzsche himself articulated this profound insight when he wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." Without meaningful challenges to provide this why, men often find themselves adrift in a sea of comfortable meaninglessness. Third is the emptiness of what Nietzsche called slave morality, a value system that emerges not from strength and confidence, but from weakness and fear. When men have never had to demonstrate courage or strength, they often adopt moral frameworks that emphasize safety, inoffensiveness, and conformity, not because these values are wrong, but because they haven't earned the right to true moral authority through personal growth and struggle. So ask yourself, do you ever feel like you're watching your life rather than living it? How many of your weekly activities actually challenge you versus merely entertain you? Perhaps most insidiously, comfortable men often become what psychologist Robert Bly called flying boys, adult males who have never truly grown up because growth requires pain. They remain perpetual adolescents, seeking stimulus and pleasure rather than meaning and achievement. Will to power. One of Nietzsche's most misunderstood concepts is the will to power. Often wrongly interpreted as a crude desire to dominate others, it actually refers to something much more profound: the drive to overcome oneself, to master one's environment, and to transform one's life into a work of art through creative struggle. The will to power stands in direct opposition to what we might call the will to comfort, the desire to eliminate all discomfort, challenge, and pain from life. Nietzsche saw this will to comfort as fundamentally life-denying, because life itself is struggle. In a powerful passage from Beyond Good and Evil, Nietzsche asserted, "The discipline of suffering, of great suffering. Do you not know that only this discipline has created all enhancements of man so far?" Here Nietzsche directly challenges our modern aversion to discomfort, suggesting that our attempts to eliminate suffering may inadvertently eliminate our potential for greatness. Modern positive psychology has validated this Nietzsche's insight through the concept of post-traumatic growth. Researchers like Tedeschi and Calhoun have documented that people who face and overcome significant adversity often experience profound positive transformations that those who avoid all suffering never achieve. Studies on innovation and leadership development have examined the biographies of history's greatest innovators and found a striking pattern. The most transformative leaders and creators typically had faced significant adversity in their formative years, not crushing, traumatic adversity, but meaningful challenges that forced them to develop grit, creativity, and resilience. Modern men are increasingly shielded from this kind of productive adversity. Helicopter parenting prevents young men from experiencing failure. Digital entertainment provides constant distraction from discomfort. Consumer culture promises that happiness is just one purchase away. The result is a generation of men who are, in Nietzsche's terms, domesticated animals rather than self-overcoming creators. Look around your life. How many devices and services do you pay for just to avoid minor discomforts? What challenge could you voluntarily embrace that might forge you into something greater? Voluntary hardship. Nietzsche's proposed what he called amor fati, the love of fate, including its hardships. But for modern men, most hardships have been engineered away. The solution, therefore, is voluntary hardship, deliberately choosing challenges that foster growth. This is where Nietzsche's philosophy aligns with modern psychological practices like hormesis, the biological principle that systems grow stronger when exposed to moderate stress. Just as muscles grow through the controlled damage of weightlifting, psychological resilience grows through voluntary challenge. The key to constructive voluntary hardship is that it must be meaningful, connected to values and goals larger than mere comfort. You need challenges that push your physical limits, like rigorous fitness programs or martial arts. You need entrepreneurial pursuits with real risk of failure that force you to face rejection. You need creative endeavors that expose you to criticism and demand skill development. And you need deep relationships that require vulnerability and emotional growth, not just surface-level connections. Each of these domains offers a pathway to the kind of meaningful struggle that NZ recognized as essential for human flourishing. As psychologist Viktor Frankl discovered through his experiences in Nazi concentration camps, the ability to find meaning in suffering is what transforms it from destructive to constructive. Research on post-traumatic growth by Tedeschi and Calhoun identified that individuals who voluntarily engage with challenges often experience greater psychological growth than those who either avoid all discomfort or face only involuntary hardships. The research has demonstrated that meaningful engagement with difficulties can lead to positive psychological transformation in ways that passive suffering does not. This Nietzschean path of voluntary hardship runs directly counter to our consumer culture's constant promise of ease and comfort. But how do we resist these powerful cultural currents that NZ warned would trap us in complacent mediocrity? Which areas of your life have become too comfortable? Physical, mental, creative, social? Share in the comments one voluntary hardship you're committing to this month that will expand your capabilities rather than diminish them. Breaking free from the comfort trap. The first step in breaking free from the comfort trap is recognizing how deeply we've internalized the value of comfort. From childhood, we're taught that happiness means the absence of discomfort. Marketing reinforces this message constantly. Products promising to make life easier, more convenient, more pleasurable. Nietzsche would argue that this equation of happiness with comfort is the fundamental error of modern life. In his view, true happiness, or more accurately, flourishing, comes from the expansion of power and capability that only occurs through challenge. The secret of reaping the greatest fruitfulness and the greatest enjoyment from life is to live dangerously, Nietzsche proclaimed. This wasn't a reckless call to needless risk-taking, but rather an exhortation to embrace the challenges that expand our capabilities instead of seeking the safety that diminishes them. Psychologist Csikszentmihalyi's research on flow states, those periods of intense engagement where we lose track of time and self-consciousness, supports this niche insight. Flow occurs precisely at the intersection of high challenge and high skill, not in conditions of comfort, but in conditions of intense, meaningful engagement with difficulty. Breaking free from the comfort trap requires a fundamental reframing of how we view discomfort. Instead of seeing it as a problem to be eliminated, we must learn to see it as information, as opportunity, as the very soil in which growth occurs. This doesn't mean glorifying suffering for its own sake, a misinterpretation of Nietzsche that has led many astray. Rather, it means developing what psychologists call discomfort tolerance, the ability to remain present and engaged with challenging experiences rather than immediately seeking escape. The famous marshmallow experiment conducted by Walter Mischel at Stanford University demonstrated that children who could delay gratification, resisting eating one marshmallow to receive two later, showed better life outcomes decades later, including higher academic performance, better health, and greater financial stability. This ability to tolerate short-term discomfort for long-term gain turns out to be one of the strongest predictors of life success, exactly what our comfort-oriented culture teaches us to avoid. Consider the transformation of David Goggins from an overweight exterminator plagued by self-doubt to an elite ultramarathon runner and Navy SEAL. Goggins deliberately sought out grueling challenges, understanding intuitively what Nietzsche taught philosophically, that his greatest potential could only emerge through struggle. He speaks about collausing the mind, deliberately exposing yourself to discomfort until you develop psychological resilience. When asked why he continues seeking suffering long after proving himself, Goggins answers in decidedly Nietzschean terms: "It's not about proving anything, it's about becoming something. His challenges were entirely self-chosen. He wasn't born into hardship, but deliberately sought it as the path to transcendence. Nietzsche's ultimate vision wasn't just personal transformation, but cultural renaissance. He dreamed of a society that valued greatness over comfort, creation over consumption, and becoming over being. In our era of unprecedented comfort and technological convenience, his message is more relevant than ever. The statistics are alarming. Rates of male depression, substance abuse, and suicide continue to rise despite, or perhaps because of, increasing material comfort and safety. In one of his most provocative statements, Nietzsche challenged, "Man is something that shall be overcome. What have you done to overcome him?" This question cuts to the heart of his philosophy, the relentless drive to transcend our current limitations, to evolve beyond what we are into what we might become. The alternative to the herd mentality isn't selfishness or domination of others, another common misreading of Nietzsche's, rather, it's the cultivation of what he called the Übermensch or overmen, individuals who transcend conventional limitations to create new values and possibilities. In psychological terms, this means moving from what Abraham Maslow called deficiency motivation, seeking to eliminate discomfort, to growth motivation, seeking to expand capacity and creativity even when uncomfortable. This shift from comfort-seeking to challenge-seeking isn't just personally transformative, it has profound implications for society. Innovation, art, scientific discovery, and cultural evolution all require individuals willing to embrace discomfort in service of creation. Research on breakthrough innovation has consistently found that transformative ideas almost universally come from individuals who were willing to endure significant failure, criticism, and hardship in pursuit of their vision, precisely the qualities our comfort-oriented culture discourages. This brings us to a dangerous question. How are you modeling the embrace of challenge for the next generation? Are you raising boys to seek comfort or to transform struggle into strength? Conclusion: Nietzsche's message isn't a call to romanticize suffering or to reject all comfort and pleasure. Rather, his philosophy challenges us to recognize that meaningful growth requires meaningful challenge, and that a life oriented entirely around comfort is, in his estimation, a life half-lived. Ask yourself, what one comfort will you sacrifice this week in exchange for meaningful growth? Will you take the path of voluntary hardship or remain in the herd? Comment your commitment below and check back to share your experience. Nietzsche's warning about herd poison, the soporific comfort that domesticates human potential, has never been more relevant than in our era of unprecedented ease and convenience. For men especially, whose identities have traditionally been forged through challenge and achievement, the comfort trap represents an existential threat to meaning and purpose. The alternative isn't random suffering but chosen challenge, what the ancient Stoics called voluntary discomfort, and what modern psychologists call hormetic stress. By deliberately seeking out challenges that expand our capabilities, we transform suffering from enemy to teacher. As Nietzsche powerfully stated, "I assess the power of a will by how much resistance, pain, torture it endures and knows how to turn to its advantage." This is perhaps the perfect distillation of his philosophy, that greatness isn't measured by avoiding difficulty, but by transforming it into strength. If you found yourself feeling strangely empty, despite having all your needs met, if you've wondered why achievement feels hollow, or why endless entertainment leaves you bored, consider that you may be experiencing exactly what Nietzsche predicted: the spiritual malaise that comes from too much comfort and too little meaningful struggle. The invitation is clear: choose your hardships before they choose you. Seek out challenges that expand rather than diminish you. Embrace discomfort not as an enemy, but as the essential catalyst for becoming who you might be. Remember, the greatest danger to your potential isn't failure or suffering, it's the comfortable mediocrity that never requires either. As Nietzsche himself put it, the man who does not wish to belong to the mass needs only to cease taking himself easily. The path beyond the herd is paved with chosen discomfort. Will you take the first step? If this exploration of Nietzsche's warnings about comfort and male potential resonated with you, consider sharing it with someone who might be trapped in the comfort zone. I'd love to hear about your own experiences with comfort versus challenge in the comments below. I read every comment and respond to as many as I can. And if you want more content that challenges conventional wisdom about philosophy, psychology, and personal development, hit that like button and subscribe to join our growing community that seeks deeper meaning beyond comfort.